I always hated when they called it a formality. That word was an excuse. A way to make people forget what an audit really was. It wasn't paperwork. It wasn't bureaucracy. It was trust written down. I spent 15 years in compliance architecture building systems to keep the worst impulses of the corporate world in check. Not to eliminate them, I'm not naive, but to slow them down. Make them think twice. My name is Graham Whitaker. I designed the audit protocol they thought they could control. It wasn't supposed to be this way. When they hired me, they sold me the dream. We want to be the gold standard. We want our vendors certified to the highest level. We want zero tolerance for fraud. And I believed them. I sat in rooms with their leadership team mapping supply chains across 3 continents. I met their vendors, real people running small workshops, local freight firms, specialist recyclers who kept them green certified. I watched them sweat when they handed over ledgers. I watched them breathe again when they passed, because the system worked. I wrote it that way. We built it on clear rules. Third-party certification, rotating auditors, no single point of failure. I even added a command line for when inevitably someone would try to cheat. I called it Initiate Hecate. They laughed at the name. Sounds dramatic. You read too much Greek tragedy, Graham. Maybe I did, because tragedy is predictable. They loved me at first. They loved the press releases. Sustainable, ethical, transparent. They loved the vendor partnerships it brought in. The green logos on their packaging, the cheaper insurance premiums. But they loved growth more. And growth meant margin pressure, which meant tolerating exceptions, which meant making trust negotiable. The first time they asked me to look the other way, it was phrased as a joke. Come on, Graham. Do you want us to hold up an entire shipment over a clerical error? It wasn't clerical. It was forged. I flagged it, Slack message, timestamped. Their reply, let's discuss. We didn't. It got worse. Quiet pressure. Polite threats. HR meetings where I was the one being difficult. One time, the chief risk officer smiled and said, "We're not asking you to change the system, Graham. Just interpret it flexibly." I said no. He didn't frown. He didn't argue. He just nodded like he'd expected it. Because this was the test. I didn't plan revenge. That's important to understand. I designed the system for this exact moment. Not to punish them, but to make sure that if they tried to break it, it would expose them instead. They didn't see it that way. They saw an employee making things hard. An obstacle. A bottleneck. One morning, HR scheduled a meeting. It was 5 minutes long. They said the phrase I'd heard whispered in the hallway for weeks. Realignment. They told me my position was redundant. I didn't argue. I didn't threaten. I just listened. Because by then, I'd already realized something critical. I wasn't leaving my system behind. I was activating it. They didn't know. They thought they were cutting out a problem. They thought they could replace me with someone cheaper, someone more reasonable, someone who'd sign anything. But I didn't build it for them. I built it for the vendors who relied on those certifications, for the freight companies that couldn't afford to bribe an inspector, for the customers who thought the green logo meant something. They told me compliance was a formality. But I wrote the formality. They forgot who designed the lock. If you've ever watched someone treat trust like an optional extra, you know why this matters. If that resonates, there's a button for that. They didn't hire me because they liked me. They hired me because they needed credibility. And they knew it. They weren't shy about saying so. I remember my first interview. Glass-walled conference room, fake succulent on the table. COO leaned back in a designer chair looking over my resume like it was a menu. He said, "We don't just want compliance, Graham. We want the gold standard." That phrase did it, because I believed him. They didn't have to beg me. I was tired of watching half measures, tired of signing off on cheap fixes for companies that called bribes relationship building. I wanted to do it right. We spent weeks in that room, mapping every vendor, every subcontractor, every port. I brought in my old playbooks, ISO standards, environmental regs, vendor due diligence checklists. I remember the giant whiteboard covered in marker scrawl, arrows, circles. Acronyms only 6 people in the building understood. They loved it. They called it transparent. They told the press they were building a new era of ethical supply chains. They weren't lying yet. I signed my contract. 80 pages of legalese. Buried in it was a clause I insisted on. I wouldn't take the job without it. Independent audit authority. Uncompromised reporting lines. It was my hill to die on. Legal told me, It's boilerplate, just a formality. I told them I knew, and I was fine with that, because I wrote the formality. After that it was work, real work. I flew economy to tiny ports, sat on plastic chairs with factory owners who spoke better English than half the exec team. Ate meals I didn't recognize because saying no was rude. Listened, watched. It wasn't just about catching fraud. It was about building something that deserved trust. I remember one vendor in Vietnam, family business, third generation. They shook my hand after the audit. Said in slow, careful English, "We can't pay bribes. Thank you for making it fair." That stuck with me. It wasn't altruism, let's not kid ourselves. For the company, every certified vendor meant better rates, cheaper insurance, lower risk ratings from banks, a green logo they could slap on the packaging and sell at a premium. But for a while it worked. We built a network of 80-plus certified partners. Auditors rotated, reports shared, nothing slipped through. And they loved me for it. They put me on panels, sent me to conferences, had me do interviews with business magazines where I wore their damn logo on my jacket. They called me head of compliance architecture, made me sound important, which was the point, because customers liked that. Investors loved it. It sounded like grown-up supervision, like they could trust us with their money. They used my words, verbatim sometimes. I'd hear phrases in earnings calls, independent certification, best-in-class audit protocols, zero tolerance for fraud. They'd look at me across the boardroom table and smirk slightly while saying it, like an inside joke. And I went along with it, for a while, because it was true. We really did hold the line. I watched good vendors win contracts over the cheap crooks. I watched freight companies finally get certified and expand. I saw real results. For a while it wasn't a lie. I know that makes it worse, because the betrayal only stings when you believe first. People think compliance is about rules. It's not. It's about limits. The red lines you can't cross no matter how much it hurts. Because once you cross them, they're gone forever. They used to nod at that. They used to say, "Exactly. That's why we need you, Graham." And I believed them. That's the worst part. That's the thing I still think about sometimes at night. Not that they fired me. Not that they tried to replace me. But that I let them convince me it mattered to them as much as it did to me. Because it did matter. It still does. Not because it's profitable. Not because it's marketable. But because it's right. They forgot that. And they forgot something else too. I never wrote those red lines for them. I wrote them for everyone they'd try to lie to. And I wrote them so they couldn't be erased. The first time they tried it was subtle, because it always is. No one in compliance ever gets an email that says, "Please break the rules." They're smarter than that. It started with a Slack message, polite, casual. "Hey Graham, can you jump on a call about this Indonesia shipment?" I said sure. I pulled the audit file. Flagged. Supplier had failed environmental review. Lead content in the packaging. Small factory cutting corners. I had the report on my screen when the call began. 3 people on the video. Legal logistics lead and my boss. They smiled too much, overly friendly. Logistics lead started, "Look, Graham, this one's tricky. The vendor's essential for this order. We're already late on the PO." I nodded, listened. Legal chimed in. "We're not asking you to approve anything improper. Just, let's be sure the standard is applied reasonably." Reasonably. That word, it's poison in this line of work. I didn't say no immediately. I asked them to explain. Logistics lead leaned in. "We've used them for years. Never had an issue until now. They're promising they'll fix it. If we flag this, the whole order is dead. Hundreds of units. Clients waiting." My boss finally spoke. "Graham, I trust your judgment. We don't want you to compromise your integrity. Just interpret the guidelines flexibly. Think big picture." I remember staring at them on the screen. 4 corporate smiles, all practiced, all waiting for me to fold. Because that's what this was, a test. I took a breath. Clicked on the Slack window. Typed. "This vendor fails to meet environmental standards. Certification denied." Sent it. Silence. Logistics lead blinked. Legal frowned. My boss cleared his throat. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He just said, "Okay, we'll figure it out." But I knew what that meant. That was the first black mark. The first time I wasn't reasonable. A week later, I got a calendar invite. Catch up with HR. Neutral subject line. I remember the office, the fake wood table, the HR rep's smile, too wide, too careful. She started with small talk. Then, we've had some feedback about your approach. I raised an eyebrow. My approach. She nodded. You're seen as rigid. Rigid. Another poison word. I asked her what policy I'd violated. She smiled again. Oh no, nothing like that. This is just a chance to align. Make sure you're supporting the business. Supporting the business. That phrase stuck in my head all day. I went back to my desk, opened Slack, scrolled the private channels. I wasn't in most of them, but I saw enough. Screenshots, messages forwarded quietly. Graham's slowing us down. He's killing deals. Why is he so difficult? Difficult. I didn't reply. I just flagged the messages, archived them. Not because I plan to use them, but because I don't delete evidence. The next shipment failed too. Different vendor, same problem, lead content. They escalated faster this time. VP of supply chain called me personally. Voice warm, practiced empathy. Graham, I know you're passionate about this. We all are. But you have to understand, business needs balance. Balance. That was the third poison word. He said, we can't hold the entire supply chain hostage because of a small detail. A small detail. Lead in packaging, untraceable in transit, sold to parents who didn't know better. I told him, I don't negotiate standards. He sighed, long, exaggerated. Okay, Graham, if that's your decision. I could hear it in his tone. He was done pretending. They didn't fire me then, not yet. But I saw it in the way they stopped replying. The way calls ended faster. The way my invites to strategy sessions disappeared. Slack went quiet. HR went silent. Legal stopped CCing me. That's how it happens. Not with a bang, but with a soft closing door. Because in their heads they'd already fired me. They just hadn't told me yet. And I didn't fight it. Because I knew something they didn't. They couldn't replace the system. I wrote it so they couldn't. It didn't happen all at once. That's the thing about corporate punishment. It's rarely loud. It's rarely honest. It's quiet, polite, documented. The HR meetings started getting more formal. No more friendly chatter about vacation plans. No more, how's the family life small talk. I got Outlook invites with subject lines like, touch point on expectations, supporting strategic alignment. I remember the first one vividly. It was a Thursday, 2 p.m. conference room 5C. Faux wood table, cheap corporate art, air conditioner that sounded like it was dying. HR sat on one side, my direct manager on the other. Legal counsel joined remote, muted mic camera off. That told me everything. HR opened her laptop and smiled at me, practiced, empty. Graham, thank you for coming. We just want to have an open conversation. I nodded, didn't say anything. She continued. We've received some feedback about your approach to compliance. I raised an eyebrow. My approach? Yes, there's a perception you're being rigid. There it was, that word again. I waited, said nothing. My boss jumped in. Graham, we value your expertise. No one is questioning your knowledge. But we need solutions, not roadblocks. Solutions. Another poisoned word. We're not asking you to compromise, he added quickly. Just to consider the broader business needs. I looked at HR. Is there a policy I've violated? She blinked, shook her head. No, of course not. This isn't disciplinary, just a conversation. Just a conversation. I noticed legal counsel unmuted for a second. Then muted again without speaking. I made a mental note. I opened my notebook. Wrote the date-time attendees. Their words almost verbatim. I don't delete evidence, ever. They wrapped the meeting in 23 minutes. HR closed her laptop, smiled one last time. We appreciate your partnership on this. Partnership. As if we were equals in this. When I left, my Slack lit up. Direct message from my boss. Hey, good talk. Let's circle back next week. Circle back. As if this was strategy planning. I didn't reply. It happened again the next month. New invite. New subject line. Alignment check-in. This time legal talked. He didn't accuse me of anything. He didn't threaten. He asked questions. Polite. Almost curious. Graham, can you walk us through why you denied the shipment certification last week? I did. Plain. Detailed. Referenced the environmental clause. Cited supplier history. He nodded. I see. But is there room for alternative interpretation? I stared at the screen. No. Silence. He tried again. Perhaps in the spirit of partnership, you could consider escalation paths before hard denials. I didn't smile. Didn't raise my voice. You're asking me to approve a supplier who fails environmental compliance. Another pause. I watched the HR rep shift uncomfortably. My boss exhaled slowly. Legal finally said, "Noted, we'll review." They ended the call early. 2 days later, I noticed my system access started to change. Little things. My admin privileges were updated. Some dashboards suddenly gave error messages. Requests I submitted hung in pending forever. Slack channels I used to be in quietly disappeared. They didn't tell me. They didn't have to. I watched them try to reroute the audit system around me. But they couldn't. Because I'd written it. Line by line, clause by clause, failsafe by failsafe. I designed it with one purpose: make cheating expensive. Make lying impossible to hide. So they turned to HR, and legal, and friendly chats. They thought they could convince me, soften me, wear me down. They thought I'd break before the system did. They were wrong. Because I wasn't the system's weakness. I was its insurance policy. It didn't end with the meetings. HR and legal were careful, polite, professional, but they needed something more permanent. A signal, not just to me, but to everyone watching. So they did what companies always do. They branded it. They didn't say termination. They didn't even say layoff. They called it realignment. I remember the day the memo dropped. Company-wide Slack channel, 2:03 p.m. Eastern. Subject line: Strategic Team Realignment, Strengthening Operational Focus. It was written like every other corporate announcement. Overlong, overpolished, empty. Paragraph 1 talked about growth initiatives. Paragraph 2 praised the dedication of the affected teams. Paragraph 3 buried the lead day. As part of this realignment, certain roles will be streamlined to improve agility and market responsiveness. My name wasn't in the memo. It didn't need to be. Everyone knew. I scrolled Slack as reactions trickled in. A few automated emojis, some polite. Thanks for the update comments. HR closed the thread an hour later. My inbox lit up next. A single meeting invite from HR. No subject line this time. Just discussion. I went, because that's what you do. They were waiting. HR rep in the usual seat, my boss across from her. Legal on-screen mic muted. HR's voice was soft. Practice sympathy. "Graham, thank you for coming. We know these conversations are never easy." I nodded, said nothing. "As you've seen, the company is undergoing a strategic realignment. Unfortunately, your role is impacted. We're eliminating the position effective immediately." Eliminating the position. Not firing me, just making me obsolete. I asked one question. "Who will be signing off on compliance certifications going forward?" They blinked. My boss shifted in his chair. HR hesitated. "We're reviewing options. Transition plans are in development." Translation: they had no one. Because I'd built the system so you couldn't just swap in a warm body. It required understanding, commitment. They didn't have either. I watched their faces. No anger, no begging. Just cold calculation. They were done pretending. My boss cleared his throat. "Graham, I want to be clear. This isn't personal." I almost laughed at that. Of course it was personal. It was personal the moment they realized I wouldn't bend. When I refused to sign off on toxic packaging. When I saved Slack threads and email chains instead of deleting them. It was personal because they couldn't change me. So they decided to remove me. HR slid a folder across the table. Paper copies despite everything else being digital. Inside, severance agreement, NDA draft, optional exit interview form. I flipped through it slowly, reading every line. They waited, silent, uncomfortable. I didn't sign anything, not that day. I thanked them for the meeting. Stood up. Buttoned my jacket. Walked out. No shouting, no threats, no speeches about ethics. Because I didn't need to say anything. They'd already made the choice. They'd declared in writing to the whole company that compliance was negotiable. That doing it right was optional. That someone like me was a cost, not an asset. I cleared my desk quietly. Took my notebook, a couple of pens. Left behind the branded coffee mug they gave me at my 5-year anniversary. On my way out, I passed the boardroom. Through the frosted glass, I saw the executive team in their chairs. Laptops open, PowerPoint on the screen, talking about efficiency, resilience, strategic opportunity. I paused, just for a second, because I realized something important. They hadn't won, not yet. They'd gotten rid of me, but they hadn't erased the system. They thought they could turn it off. Rewrite it. Swap in someone more compliant. But I didn't write it for them. I wrote it for the vendors who deserved a fair audit. For the partners who built their businesses on our certification. For the customers who believed the green logo meant something. And I wrote it with a safeguard they didn't even remember. Initiate Hecate. They thought firing me was the end of it. That if they revoked my badge, cut my access, wiped my Slack, it would all go quiet. They forgot I wasn't the system. I wrote the system. Every clause, every rule, every exception path. I sat in glass conference rooms for months. Whiteboard markers in my pocket. Vendor contracts spread out like battle plans. I designed it for chaos. Because I know people. I know they cheat. I know they lie. And I know they're smart enough to look for loopholes. They paid me well to build them something bulletproof. They didn't realize bulletproof means it has to work, even when you don't want it to. So I wrote in the safeguards. Not for them. For the vendors who couldn't bribe. For the customers who couldn't check. For the auditors who didn't want to lose their licenses over a bad call. I called it Watchdog Protocol. They thought it was branding. A marketing line for investor decks. Best-in-class compliance architecture. But I meant it literally. A watchdog doesn't need permission to bite. Inside the audit system, there were layers they never bothered to understand. Integrity checks. Cross-vendor consistency algorithms. Geotagged shipping audits. Automated anomaly detection. And one final command. Initiate Hecate. Hecate, goddess of boundaries. The one who stood at the crossroads. It wasn't a trap. Traps are set for someone. They're personal. Petty. This wasn't about me, or them. It was about the system doing what it was built to do. I remember the day I finished writing that command. I stayed late. Office empty. Security lights buzzing. I leaned back in my chair. Stared at the code. Thought about the vendors I'd met. The ones who didn't speak English fluently, who trusted the certification to get them paid. I thought about the kids who'd end up chewing on the packaging. The lead that wouldn't show up in time. So I typed it, line by line. No backdoors, no override, no manager escalation. Initiate Hecate was the kill switch. A signal to the system to invalidate any certification with compromised audit data. It couldn't be undone. Not without rewriting the entire protocol from scratch. And they didn't have anyone who could do that. Because I hadn't taught them how. They hadn't wanted to know. They wanted a black box they could point to in the investor call. We're fully compliant. But black boxes can't lie. They can only reveal the truth inside. When they fired me, they didn't realize they'd lost the only person who could stop it from triggering. I hadn't pulled the trigger yet, because I was stubborn. Because I kept thinking maybe someone would wake up, that they'd call. Ask to fix it the right way. Choose the hard path. They didn't. Instead, they sent out memos, smiled in press photos, promised shareholders they had it all under control. They forgot the system wasn't designed to obey them. They'd given me authority. In writing. In the contract they said was just a formality. Because investors liked hearing independent audit authority. Because vendors demanded it. Because they sold that integrity. They didn't realize they were selling something that couldn't be taken back. After they fired me, I sat at my kitchen table. Laptop open. A cup of cold coffee I hadn't touched. I pulled up the admin panel. My login was revoked. Expected. But the system had redundancies. Offline keys, encrypted backups, a command line with no dependency on their server. Because that was the deal. If anyone ever tried to force false certifications through, I could stop it. Not by punishing them, but by cutting off the lie at the source. Initiate Hecate. I didn't use it that day, but I thought about it. Because it wasn't about revenge. It was about consequences. They wanted trust to be optional, negotiable, for sale. But trust isn't optional. It's the whole system. They thought they could erase me. But you can't erase the truth once it's written. If you've ever seen them try to make trust optional, you know why this matters. If you understand why systems need boundaries, there's a button for that. They didn't realize how fast it would spread, because they never bothered to understand how the system actually worked. They thought it was just checkboxes, a marketing bullet point, a way to get cheaper insurance and brag in shareholder letters. But the system didn't care about their strategy decks. It cared about the data. A week after they fired me, the first vendor called them panicked because their certification had disappeared from the portal. No warning, no appeal, just gone. They'd tried to process a shipment through a customs checkpoint that required the green seal. It flagged instantly. Rejected. Another vendor emailed. Then 10, then 30. Compliance at HQ tried to respond. Form letters. We're aware of a temporary issue with certification visibility. We're working to restore normal service. Except it wasn't a visibility issue. It was the watchdog protocol. When Initiate Hecate went live, it invalidated any audit that had been tampered with. It wasn't subtle. It didn't negotiate. The system was designed to make cheating impossible to hide. It flagged the fraud for what it was: corrupt data, unverifiable sourcing, non-compliant packaging. Their Slack channels lit up at first. I heard from a friend who stayed on the team. Screenshots of frantic messages. Who authorized this invalidation? Where's the override? We need to clear this for shipping now. But there was no override, because I hadn't built one. By day 3, the Slack channels started going quiet. People realized every message was discoverable. Every frantic plan to fix it was being logged. They stopped talking. Emails replaced Slack, then phone calls, then whispers in hallways. Vendors started calling legal directly, threatening breach of contract, holding up production lines. Procurement systems began rejecting their bids. Automated compliance integrations they'd boasted about suddenly treated them like they didn't exist. Their entire value proposition, "We're the green ethical choice," collapsed in a week. Insurance providers raised rates overnight. Banks sent polite letters reviewing their credit lines. Shareholders started asking questions they couldn't answer. And I watched, not gleeful, not smug, just quiet. Because this was never about revenge. It was about proving the system worked. That integrity wasn't negotiable. They sold that promise for years, told everyone they were the gold standard, convinced vendors to sign exclusive deals, charged premiums to customers who believed the label meant something. And when they tried to cheapen it to fake it, the system did exactly what it was designed to do. It stopped them, loudly. I didn't have to leak anything, didn't have to go to the press, didn't need a lawsuit. All I did was let the truth speak in the only language they cared about: their bottom line. One vendor emailed me directly. Not through my old work address, obviously. Through a personal one he'd found from an old business card. He wrote, "Did you do this?" I stared at the screen for a long time, then typed back, "No, the system did." Because that's the point. It wasn't me they had to fear. It was the reality they'd tried to deny. They didn't respond to my email. Didn't need to. By the end of that week, I heard legal had scheduled an all-hands. Mandatory. No recordings allowed. Phones checked at the door. They were scrambling, trying to patch together a strategy, craft the right PR spin. I could imagine the slides. "We value transparency. We're committed to our partners. We're investigating unexpected technical issues." But there was no technical issue, no bug, no hack. Just their own shortcuts coming home to roost. Because the system didn't break. It enforced the rules they pretended to follow. And I didn't have to do anything else. Because once trust is broken, you can't just patch it over with a new marketing campaign. You have to rebuild it, or watch it burn. They didn't go public immediately. They never do. They tried to contain it. First came the emergency meetings. Calendars filled overnight with mandatory syncs. Subject lines carefully vague. Operational review. Partner relations update. Cross-functional alignment. Inside those meetings, they tried to sound calm. But I know the language of panic. They didn't say fraud. They said unexpected certification interruptions. They didn't say audit failures. They said process deviations. PR wrote drafts. I saw one later. It leaked to a vendor rep who sent me a screenshot. "We remain committed to transparency and are proactively addressing minor system inconsistencies, impacting a subset of partners." Minor, subset. Meanwhile, entire supply chains froze. Shipments stuck at ports. Procurement systems rejecting POs automatically. Because you can't PR spin a customs form that says non-compliant. Vendors weren't fooled. They started calling each other, forming little networks of their own, comparing notes. I heard from a friend at one of the freight companies. They'd sent 4 escalation emails in a single day. No response. Then a form letter. "We appreciate your patience as we improve our certification process." Improve. That word is code for we broke it and don't know how to fix it. Leadership scrambled. Scheduled an all-hands for the compliance team. Phones checked at the door. Recordings forbidden. They went through slides. Corporate template. Blue gradient background. White sans serif font. Our commitment to ethics. Driving strategic transparency. Learning opportunities. I can imagine it. Someone in the back raising a hand. What's our actual plan? Silence, because there was no plan. The system wasn't down. It was working exactly as designed. They tried everything. Resetting vendor credentials, manually toggling certifications, calling their IT vendor at 2 a.m. But those integrations weren't their system. They were mine, built with cryptographic keys they no longer controlled. I'd built them redundantly, distributed, independent of HQ's whims. Slack messages I saw later. Who has override? Asked Graham. Silence. Someone replies, he's gone. They forgot something simple. You can't fire the system architect and then ask him to fix it for you. But they tried anyway. HR sent me an email from a generic address. We'd like to discuss a potential consulting arrangement. No subject line, no signature, just cowardice in plain text. I didn't reply. Vendors weren't patient. They escalated to compliance boards. They posted in industry forums. Some threatened lawsuits. Others just walked away. The board of directors got involved. Demanded daily briefings. Legal issued preliminary investigations to look busy. I heard they blamed technical debt. That's a good phrase. Vague. Blameless. Makes it sound like an accident. They didn't want to admit the truth. That the debt wasn't technical. It was ethical. They chose short-term margin over trust. They treated integrity like an optional feature. And the system exposed them for it, because that's what it was designed to do. Not punish them. Reveal them. They forgot that compliance isn't a shield you hold up in front of investors. It's a mirror. One that doesn't lie. One vendor sent me another email. Short, to the point. Is it permanent? I read it twice. Typed back. It's permanent until they fix what they broke. They never replied. But I know they understood. Because that's the thing about systems. They don't care about intentions. They don't care about marketing. They care about reality. And reality doesn't negotiate. I wasn't planning on answering them. After they fired me, I figured it was over. My part was done. Let the system speak for itself. But vendors talk. They share contact lists. They dig through old signatures on PDF contracts. And eventually they found me. The first email came at 2:14 a.m. encrypted, subject line blank. We don't know who else to ask. I remember sitting at my kitchen table. Dark, except for the laptop screen. Cold coffee from hours before, reading those words over and over. I thought about ignoring it, about telling myself it wasn't my responsibility anymore, but I couldn't, because I knew them. I'd certified them, sat in their offices, ate their food, listened to their fears about bigger players pushing them out. I sold them on trust, on the promise that this system would keep them safe if they played by the rules, and now it was failing them for no fault of their own. So I replied, encrypted cautious. What exactly do you want to know? They responded almost immediately. Is it true our certs are revoked? We can't ship. Our buyers threatening penalties. We did everything right. I read their list of panic. Lines that sounded like Slack messages from my old job. But this time, with real money on the line. Real people. I typed slow, careful, plain. If you passed all audits honestly, you're fine. But the system doesn't trust the company anymore. They didn't reply for 20 minutes. When they did, what can we do? That was the question that hurt. Because they shouldn't have to ask me. They should have had channels, support, answers. Instead, all they got was PR spin, form letters, silence. So I told them the truth. Document everything. Don't falsify anything. Keep records. If they won't help, go direct to the compliance board. I'll vouch if asked. I didn't have to offer that. But I did. Because I remembered one factory owner in Vietnam. How he shook my hand and said, "We can't pay bribes. Thank you for making it fair." I wasn't going to be the reason he lost his contract now. That wasn't the only message. They started coming daily. Different time zones, broken English, perfect legalese. Some angry, some begging, some just exhausted. They wanted clarity. They wanted fairness. They wanted someone to tell them the truth. I realized something in those days. I wasn't the enforcer. I was the bridge. That was always the point. Not to punish people, to make sure the good ones didn't get crushed by the ones who cheated. I didn't leak anything. Didn't publish a tell-all. Didn't call a lawyer to plan my lawsuit. I just answered, quietly, consistently. I sent one vendor an entire audit checklist I'd written years before. Removed the company branding. Told them, use this. It's still valid. Don't wait for them to help. Another asked if I'd sign an affidavit about their compliance history. I said yes, because I built the system for them. Not for the company that fired me. They forgot that. They forgot that integrity doesn't belong to the highest bidder. It belongs to the people who have to live with the consequences. One night I picked up the phone at midnight. Didn't recognize the number. Vendor in Malaysia. Voice shaking, barely above a whisper. They're telling us we're blacklisted. I closed my eyes, listened, let him get it all out. Then I said the only thing that mattered. Show me your records. If you did it right, I'll make sure they can't deny it. He was quiet a long time. Then he thanked me, hung up, and I sat there, phone in my hand, screen glowing in the dark, realizing this wasn't revenge. This was triage, cleaning up the damage they'd tried to hide. It didn't happen in a rush. That's what people get wrong. They think revenge is dramatic, explosive. But this wasn't about payback. It was about inevitability. I spent days fielding those vendor calls. Emails at all hours, encrypted chats, no schedule. Just a string of people asking the same question in different ways. What happens now? How do we fix this? Who do we trust? And I kept giving them the same answer. Document everything. Prove your compliance. Don't lie. I didn't promise them a miracle. I wasn't trying to be a hero. I was just trying to be honest. But the company wasn't. While I was talking to vendors, they were talking to lawyers, to spin doctors, to PR agencies, trying to patch trust with slogans, trying to buy time with silence. I saw the emails forwarded to me anonymously. Repackage the message, minimize the scope, no need to volunteer details. They were still treating it like a branding issue. Like trust was a design choice. They didn't understand it was infrastructure. You can't market your way out of a collapsed bridge. You can't slogan your way across a sinkhole. I waited. Longer than I should have. Hoping someone would call. Ask for help. Admit they'd messed up. Offer to fix it the right way. No one did. One night around 1 a.m., I sat alone in my apartment. Quiet except for the hum of the fridge. Laptop open, VPN active, secure channel. On the screen, admin interface, offline backup, watchdog protocol, status armed. I watched the blinking cursor, a single line waiting for input. I'd written it so it couldn't be called accidentally. No shortcuts. No GUI button for a panicked manager to hit by mistake. You had to mean it. You had to type it all out. Iniziate hecate. I sat with my fingers hovering over the keyboard, because I knew what it meant. It wasn't some flashy self-destruct. It wouldn't crash servers or leak emails. It would simply do what it was designed to do. It would retract every compromise certification. Every record altered to look clean. Every shortcut blessed with a wink. It wouldn't punish them. It would expose them. It would force them to stop pretending. I thought about the vendors. The ones who played by the rules. Who spent money they didn't have on compliance audits. Who trusted us. Who trusted me. Because I told them to. I remembered the factory owner who couldn't bribe. The logistics operator who switched to non-toxic packaging even though it cut margins. I thought about them staring at rejection notices. Shipments stuck. Clients angry. Not because they cheated, but because my former employer did. I had the chat window open with one of them still. His last message blinking. We did everything right. Why are we being punished? Because in the end, I wasn't punishing them. I was pulling the mask off the people who were. So I typed it, slow, deliberate, each letter like a weight. INITIATE, OIECATA. I didn't hit enter right away. I read it back, once, twice. No typos, no ambiguity. Because there's no undo, no apology email, no PR plan that survives it. Finally, I pressed enter. Nothing flashy, no fireworks. Just a system log, timestamp, command acknowledged. The back-end triggers fired. Certificates invalidated. Vendor records requeried. Every falsified audit marked untrustworthy. I watched the logs scroll. Error messages. Flags. Notices sent automatically to procurement systems. The quiet work of truth reasserting itself. No one to blame, no scapegoat, just math, just data, just reality, and me, sitting in the dark, watching it happen. Not happy, not vindicated. Just certain it was the only thing left to do. Because if integrity is negotiable, it's already gone. They forgot that. And I was done reminding them nicely. It didn't take long. That's what happens when you build something correctly. Failure propagates at the speed of truth. Within 12 hours of hitting enter, the flags went live across procurement systems. Vendor certifications marked invalid. Shipment clearances auto-rejected. ERP dashboards blinking red. Procurement managers started panicking. Not just ours, our partners, our biggest customers. I heard about one client's internal call. They sat in a conference room, CFO in the lead, watching error banners roll in, one by one. Vendor IDs, failing compliance validation. They called our leadership, demanded answers, didn't get any. Because there weren't any. You can't lie to an automated system you trained to detect fraud. You can't talk your way past a line of code. Inside the company, they tried to hold the line. Slack channels filled with frantic plans. Can we override temporary fix, get it on this now? But there was no override, no admin shortcut, no just this once, because I'd written it that way. No exception paths, no emergency passwords, no special keys for the C-suite. The system didn't care who asked, didn't care how expensive the shipment was, didn't care about quarterly targets. It only cared if the audit was true, and most weren't. I got forwarded an email chain from legal. Screenshots someone took before they were locked out. We're being blacklisted. Our vendors are leaving. What did Graham do? That made me pause, because even then they thought it was me. They didn't understand. I didn't break anything. I didn't hack them. Didn't sabotage a thing. I enabled it. The system did exactly what it was supposed to do. It refused to certify lies. It refused to be complicit. I wasn't in the boardroom when the investors called, but I can imagine it. Long table, speakerphone on, crackling. An investor's voice, sharp, cold. Is it true you lost audit compliance? Is it true vendors are abandoning you? What is your plan? And the CEO trying to keep his voice even. Buying time with corporate buzzwords. We're committed to transparency. We're exploring remediation pathways. Our teams are aligned on next steps. Empty words, because the system didn't care about their next steps. It had already acted. Procurement contracts went into breach. Insurance rates spiked. Banks quietly reviewed credit terms. Clients initiated exit clauses. I heard they even tried a mass call with vendors. One last plea. A big Zoom grid of nervous faces. Pitch deck ready. New compliance lead trying to smile. We understand there have been challenges. We want to rebuild trust. Silence. No one spoke, no one asked questions. Because they'd all seen the system fail them once. Trust wasn't a promise you could renew like a domain name. It was gone. Slack went silent. Channels archived. Accounts deactivated. People stopped talking at all. Because every message was discoverable. Every plan to bend the truth. Every suggestion to interpret flexibly. All sitting in logs, time-stamped, immutable. They started resigning. First quietly, then publicly. I didn't gloat. Didn't celebrate. I just watched, alone. Because I'd warned them. Not with threats, but with design. I told them the system wouldn't let them cheat. I told them integrity wasn't negotiable. I told them if they tried, it would expose them. They didn't believe me. Now they had no choice. They didn't issue a press release. Not right away. I watched their website for weeks. No mention of the certifications lost. No apology. Just silence. They thought they could wait it out. That people would forget. But trust doesn't expire quietly. It rots in public. I kept getting messages from vendors, former colleagues, even quiet internal whistleblowers using burner emails. They all asked variations of the same question. What happens now? It's a fair question. Because the system didn't burn the company down. It didn't sue them. Didn't leak private emails to the press. It just exposed them. And exposure isn't punishment. It's consequence. They chose shortcuts. They chose flexible interpretations. They chose silence when they should have spoken. And the system chose to show them exactly what that meant. I didn't celebrate. Didn't call a reporter to explain my genius. Didn't make a LinkedIn post bragging about my ethics. I just sat in my apartment. Quiet. Laptop closed. I opened my old notebook. The one I used to bring to every compliance meeting. Notes, clauses, audit rules. On the last page I'd written a line years ago. A reminder to myself. Trust isn't optional. I traced the words with my finger. Slow, like a habit, a ritual. I thought about the factory owners who had bet everything on honest certification. The freight operators who didn't have bribes built into their budgets. The clients who wanted to believe a green label meant something real. They weren't perfect. No one is. But they deserved better than lies. So did I. It wasn't revenge. I'm not naive enough to think it fixes anything. The company will rebrand, hire new consultants, spend millions on damage control. But they won't forget. Because now every vendor knows the truth. Every partner saw them exposed. They can't unsend the error flags, can't delete the logs, can't unbreak the trust. If they want to come back from this, they'll have to build it the hard way. The honest way. The way they promised when they hired me. That's not my problem anymore. I didn't design the system to trap them. I designed it to outlast me. To make sure the rules stayed written. Even if they fired the one person who cared. Because in the end, systems don't hold grudges. They hold people accountable. And that's all I ever wanted. Not to punish, to prove. That trust is infrastructure. That it's either solid or it's nothing. They forgot that. I reminded them. Now I'm done. But if you've ever seen them try to treat trust like an optional extra, if you've watched someone get punished for telling the truth, if you think the people who play by the rules deserve better, there's a button for that. Because trust isn't optional, it's the whole system.